What is up, guys? It's time for an MLB Deeper Dive, where today you are going to get the privilege of us going game by game for the 8-game main slate that'll be coming up here in just a few hours. We'll do our best to walk you through the top stacks, top pitchers, all the information you need to know. But I am Chris Spags, joined once again by the top player in DFS, the namesake of this YouTube channel, as well as all the content we have at Awesemo.com. He's Alex Awesemo Baker. How you doing, Alex?
What's up, guys? It's been an interesting morning in the baseball world. I thought I was getting all geared up for this 12 p.m. slate, and then the two games got postponed, and I know you guys were toughing it out. So
yeah, we are thankfully less toughing it out for this one. We have more games to talk about. We have another man with us today, guy you see every Wednesday on here on the MLB Deeper Dive. He's Max Smotritskiy. How you doing, Max?
What's up, guys? Yeah, I mean, another interesting slate coming up. We're going to talk about how we can possibly fade Coors on an 8-game slate.
Yeah, hopefully there'll be some pathway here to get different on the slate. So right now, make sure you guys hit that like button. Obviously helps us out a bunch here in the MLB world, where NBA is still going on. In fact, the biggest NBA slate, probably last big NBA slate of the year coming up today. So make sure you are checking out our content on the channel. But also the MLB shows need extra love during these times. So make sure you are hitting that like button and subscribe to the channel as well. But hit the like button on the MLB content if you can. And also to make sure that you are taking advantage of the biggest edge you can find in sports betting today by going over to OddsShopper.awesemo.com or OddsShopper.com. It's important to use that tool as one that's going to give you the best line available for any game or player prop or futures bet you can find out there, because they're compiling the best bets in real time for game lines, player props, and team futures. Again, all updated in real time. It's the biggest edge you can find for yourself, just shopping for those lines in the best one you can in real time. So go check them out right now. Check out the expected win percentage and ROI percentage tools as well on the NBA player props. Lots of good ways to make money or save yourself money on your bets by going to OddsShopper.com or OddsShopper.awesemo.com. And if you're looking for one more DFS sports a DGen, maybe you didn't love that morning slate for MLB, the good news is our tennis projections are up. So if you're trying to get there, give them a chance. The French Open underway. We just launched our premium tennis DFS projections, which are free for the French Open. We'll be going behind the paywall come Wimbledon. So now's your chance to preview them. Draftkings is offering contests with as much as $20K being awarded to first place. So there's potential big money to be had here. You can find them under our tennis category on the homepage at Awesemo.com. So go check those out if you're trying to get a little more diversification to sports in your life. But let's get into the game by game here, because we got 8 games to hit on. And the first one up on the slate, Tampa Bay, 3.9 implied runs going against Jordan Montgomery. Jordan Montgomery, a guy we've, I think, maligned at parts of the show this year. Maybe at least I have. I don't know if everybody else. I'll save you guys from the Jordan Montgomery reprieve, but now up to a 25% K rate for himself on the year, just shy of that. A 1.1 whip, not walking guys at a crazy high clip. And today, Alex, he does face a Tampa Bay team that strikes out at a 31% rate against left-hand pitching on the year. Definitely some dangerous power in the lineup, but still on paper, pretty good spot for Montgomery, who will be owned. Looks like about 20% of the field. And honestly, the projection that our data team has for him today, not looking the best. So how are you approaching one Jordan Montgomery?
yeah, I mean, Tampa Bay is an interesting matchup because they have a good lineup that usually strikes out a lot. But I'm seeing today, I think we just got their lineup. It's a little bit watered down, not a ton of great batters, but also not as many strikeouts as you usually see. And then as far as conditions, it's like 70 degrees in New York, so nothing special there. All in all, I think this is an average spot for Montgomery in every way. His strikeout rate of 24 is just above the league average. The weather is average. The matchup's average. The only thing is the price on DraftKings is 9,300. That's quite high. Fanduel at 7,500 seems more reasonable to me.
Max, you buying any more on Jordan Montgomery here with about 1/5 the field expected to be on him on DraftKings today?
Yeah, that feels high, like, doesn't it? I mean, he's a perfect GPP play usually, just because you never really know what you're going to get with him, but the upside is always there with the strikeouts, especially in this Tampa matchup. But at that ownership and at that price, I just don't know if I'm going to get there. I mean, we saw that these guys in Tampa really just swing for the fences or strike out. But Jordan Montgomery really allows a ton of fly balls and a ton of hard contact to righties. So it's not a great matchup. 9,300 is like 1K too much, in my opinion, on DraftKings. So I think at 20%, I would definitely go under that if I was MMEing today.
Yeah, I think I'm on the same page as you guys here. Feels like the price tag for a little bit cheaper, or if you were a little bit lower owned, you could sort of justify it either way. But 20% ownership for Montgomery at this price tag, only throwing 81 pitches per start or per appearance so far this year. Not the best numbers for Montgomery at the price, but certainly a GPP option for you guys out there. Tampa Bay has 3.9 implied runs on their side, and this is a spot where you are going to get leverage on a good portion of the field, it looks like. So, Max, you have any more interest here in the Tampa Bay hitters, and which should be a park upgrade playing at New York today? It does seem like it's a fairly humid day, not the hottest overall, though, but still better than their home park.
Where's Zunino? That's the guy I want to play. I mean, the guy that swings for the fences in New York with the short porch and right, he hits the ball the other way a bunch. Like, I don't know. That's the guy I would want to play. I guess Mike Brissell at 2.5K, but he always gets pinch hit for once the lefty comes out. So I don't know. Like Randy's 5.9K. That's a lot for a guy that hits so many ground balls. Yeah, I mean, the guys that I'm really interested in Tampa are always Zunino and Meadows. But Meadows swinging from the left side against a guy that can like throw a bunch of breaking balls out there against him isn't somebody I really want to target. And Randy at 5.9K, like I mentioned, is slugging at 343. That's not giving me a lot of confidence with a 7.4 degree launch angle. So yeah, I think it's a pass for me with Tampa, even on the short slate.
Alex, you find a little more interesting here in Tampa, and I would agree with Max's take here that the one-offs look a little bit more appealing to me than the full stack, but certainly some ways they can touch up Montgomery, and they do seem a little bit under-owned according to the top stacks tool. So how are you feeling about these guys?
Yeah, I think they could be a good dart throw in GPPs. The one thing that stands out, though, is Randy Arozarena at 5,900 on DraftKings. That's just an exorbitant price tag, especially he hasn't really continued batting at the same level as last year. His playoffs, he's only had a 150 ISO so far this year, so it's not like he's even been slugging. Then Austin Meadows has the lefty-lefty matchup, so he's looking pretty expensive. So it does become a little bit of a hard stack to fill out.
On the other side, we're going to have Shane McClanahan going against the Yankees. 4.6 implied runs for the Yankees in this spot. Seems kind of surprising given how good McClanahan's been. I'm only throwing 68 pitches per appearance so far, averaging about 4.5 innings per go, but 30% K rate, just shy of that for him so far in the year. A 2.8 xFIP. The swing, strike, and chase rate numbers have been outstanding. Velocity, 97.4 miles per hour, also been really solid. McClanahan looks pretty good at the price tag, I feel like, Alex, but the risk here of the power going against him, and I guess also that he just might not be pitching deep enough into the game. Some cause for concern, but 5% ownership, it still feels a little bit light to me.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, he's off to a pretty solid start with the strikeouts. So that has been exceeding expectations so far. The matchup versus the Yankees, they have a very strong power hitting team lineup, and they don't strike out a ton, so definitely some negative factors, but it does seem like a guy that maybe is an interesting GPP play. Just if he can get lucky with the strikeouts, maybe that correlates to having success limiting the runs too.
Max, are you into Shane McClanahan at all here? It's not a fantastic projection for him, but the strikeouts have been there, and he's also been, I think, a little bit unlucky in terms of his BABIP so far, but giving up league average power, actually a little bit under that, 2.8% on run rate. You want to go to McClanahan at a seemingly a decreased price tag here?
Yeah, I think I'm really interested. I think because the perceived matchup is bad, but these guys, like the Yankees, have not been hitting like the Yankees this year. They've had flashes, but other than Judge, they're all having down years, really. Stan coming back from the injury has not looked the same as he did beforehand. LeMahieu's not really hitting for power. It's just a bunch of ground balls. If you look at their expected statistics, like other than Judge, nothing jumps out at you here. Gary Sanchez has some power, but he also strikes out 27%, 30% K rate for Stanton, 25% for Judge. They don't strike out as a whole, like more than, I think it's 24%, which is average. But in parts, there's a ton of strikeouts here. And this guy is like a flame-throwing left-hander, which you always love to see. I would love to see him throw more pitches than, in the high 60s. If somebody could tell me that he's throwing 85 pitches today, I would probably be all in at the 5% ownership that he's projected for. But I think he's a great GPP play. We were talking about how you can get different on the slate like this with Coors projecting so much better than every other stack. And I think this is the guy that can differentiate it.
We also got the Yankees hitters on the other side again, 4.6 implied runs, not a bad total for them either. And McClanahan, if he is going to regress, certainly one way you can do that is giving up a little more power to the Yankees. But this stack, it does seem not too highly owned and not the highest probability to be a top stack. So I'm more of a believer in McClanahan myself, Max, but are you willing to go to the Yankees side at all here, given he is a young pitcher and certainly one who could be capable of giving him more power than we've seen so far?
No, it's just not a ton of power from the Yankees. Like looking at their barrel percentages, looking at their launch angle, it just doesn't tell me that they're about to start hitting home runs, which is what you need to win a GPP. Like, sure, they walk a ton still. They'll put really good at-bats together. You saw that versus Glasnow yesterday. But I just don't think this is something that can win you a GPP with how good McClanahan is and how good the Tampa bullpen is, really.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Alex, do you have any more interest here in the Yankees hitters, or you just want to keep it moving?
It does look like they've been getting kind of unlucky with extra base hits so far this year. I'm looking at the differential between 2020 ISO and 2021. So DJ LeMahieu had a 226 ISO last year, 75 this year so far. Gary Sanchez is down 40. Clint Frazier's down 100. So it's if you're just looking at this year's stats, it looks pretty rough, but if you factor in several years, it looks like a pretty solid lineup. Matchup, I think is a slight negative, but not terrible. So I think it's worth taking some shots here for sure.
All right, next game up. And guys, hit that like button if you can. We appreciate that support a bunch here on the channel. Really, any videos you're watching, whether it be our channel or elsewhere, always good to throw likes to the content creators that you enjoy the work of, or at least are following the work of on YouTube. So please help us out. Hit that like button if you can. Next game up, we got a very chalky Twins team once again going against Matt Harvey. And Matt Harvey has been bad on the year, giving up a 302 batting average, 18% K rate, which is under league average. Less home runs than you would think at just the 3% home run rate. And you could also make the case he's a little bit unlucky with a 350 BABIP on the year, but not missing bats in any meaningful way. I think we're all going to, actually, maybe we won't, but I'll just assume, unless you guys tell me otherwise, that we're not into Matt Harvey. But the hitters on the other side going to be very highly owned here. 19% stack ownership projected for Minnesota, along with 11% chance of being a top stack. So they look like one of the most over-leveraged teams on the slate. That top stack tool also free today on the site, so make sure to check that out. I'll drop a link in the chat in a second here. But we've seen the situation in the last few days, Alex, where the Twins have had some really tough games against Baltimore, or at least, down games relative to fantasy performance, where Jorge Lopez, Bruce Zimmerman looking like world beaters recently for whatever reason. Are you buying in on the Twins here with so much ownership and it being a big enough slate that you can move away?
Yeah, I think the Twins were super chalk last night too, and they kind of busted, it looks like. So Max, I see you're still remembering that. So I don't think people will have any hesitation to go back to the well. It does, but maybe there's a sour taste that'll depress ownership a tiny bit. Just people learning their lesson, I guess. But the spot's amazing. You're going up against Harvey, who's a below average pitcher in a park that is a batter's park. Now, the conditions today aren't exceptional. 70 degrees, 70% humidity, so pretty average for Camden Yards. But the matchup is good. And the Twins always have a really solid lineup that doesn't really pop as much statistically because of their home park. So I think they have a pretty nice park shift here.
Max, how are you feeling about the Twins? High ownership expected across the board here. Guys like Josh Donaldson, Nelson Cruz, Miguel Sano, even Ben Rortvedt, all going to be around 25%. Though Rortvedt is at the minimum salary on DK, so that's part of that. But we've seen, again, these guys playing down a little bit recently because some of the Baltimore pitchers keeping the ball down pretty well in terms of launch angle and all that. And I'm actually curious where you break out with this, because Matt Harvey, 14.63 launch angle, not perfect, but also not exactly home run level. So are you willing to buy in on the Twins being this chalky against a team that they've been, I guess, maybe unlucky with, or just not a perfect matchup with the last few days?
Listen, I've been playing the Twins chalk, and I don't think it's bad. Their launch angles are great as a team. They hit for power. They've just been getting super unlucky. Like, the barrel percentages are ridiculous. For Alex Kirilloff, it's like 17.5. Nelson Cruz, 15. Donaldson, 15. Larnack, 20. I mean, they're just hitting the ball exactly where you want, but it just hasn't panned out into really breakout games. I hate seeing them as chalk today. I was hoping that Coors would take away some of that ownership, but it apparently hasn't taken away enough. As you mentioned, Harvey's not actually that good of a power matchup. Only 6.5% barrel percentage allowed, which is lower end of the league, and 37.9% hard contact. But the thing is with Orioles is like their bullpen sucks too. They're just bad throughout, which is really a perfect matchup for a stack. I mean, I think I'm just gonna keep rolling these guys out there, even as chalk, and just hope they're not as chalky as we project them to be. It's just too good a matchup, and these guys are the perfect stack that I want to see with the way that they hit the ball.
It seems like some of the lower owned options, if you do want to go to the Twins, one of the guys that Max just mentioned, Larnack, is going to be under 10%. Ref Snyder also under 7%, and you have Polanco under 12%. So there are some ways. Kirilloff also a little bit less owned. So pairing one of these guys, especially the lower owned guys, and Larnack and Ref Snyder, one way to get different with the stack if you are going there. But it seems like a worthwhile team either way to try to get a little bit less in the field, with about a quarter of the field expected to be on some of these guys. On the other side, we have Randy Dobnak going against Baltimore, 4.5 implied runs going against Dobnak. And I have to assume he's another guy that we don't have much interest in on the pitching side of the equation. Just a 16.5% K rate for him last year, 15.9% since 2019. Not a lot to offer in terms of pitch count either for him. So could be more of a bullpen day, really. But Baltimore side do have a slightly higher ownership, their chance of being a top stack today, Max. So it seems to me like not the most appealing spot for either Dobnak or Baltimore. But how are you feeling about the Orioles? And I guess if you feel anything for Dobnak too, feel free to chime in on his behalf.
Yeah, no Dobnak for me, even though that mustache is fantastic. I know I always mention it when he's on the slate. But yeah, I mean, he's an extreme ground ball guy, doesn't strike anybody out really. But only 14% fly balls to righties, a little bit more with 30% to lefties and 36% hard hit rate. So if I was interested in anybody, it would be the Orioles lefties. Unfortunately, other than like Santander, they just don't have very many good hitters from that side. So I guess it's Santander as a one-off for me. Maybe DJ Stewart if I really need the extreme salary savings. And I don't know, man. Cedric Mullins has just been having great game after great game, but I don't usually play these punch and Judy type hitters. But he has shown a little bit more power this year than last year.
Alex, is there anything you like from Baltimore here going against Dobnak?
I think the prices are solid. They do pop in our top value metric for stacks, but that's not really a GPP strategy I usually pursue, because with the good prices, it draws a lot of people to the stack with more expensive pitchers and second stacks. So I don't have any problem not playing this one, but it does look a little bit interesting where the top of the order looks like it has most of the ownership. So if you start going down below the top 4, you can start seeing guys like Ryan Mountcastle at 1%. He's kind of a prospect that hasn't produced yet, but he's supposed to be a great power hitter eventually. So that could be one guy I'd consider.
Our next game up, we got Miami getting 3.3 implied runs against Alek Manoah. Excuse me. He's not an Alex. He hasn't earned that right yet. He's got a K on his name. But he is a pitcher who looked really good in his first start in the majors this year. 31.8% K rate. Did have a 3.8 xFIP, giving up a high launch angle when these guys were making contact, along with a 54% fly ball rate. So maybe some signs of things to come. I have to say the swinging strike rate, the chase rate, not the most impressive given the amount of strikeouts he had. He still looks pretty solid at 11.4% swing strike rate, 28.6% chase rate, but the velocity too, just shy of 95 miles per hour. Maybe not as much of a blowaway guy as he seemed like he was in that first start, Alex, but it does seem like Manoah in a good spot again against Miami. We saw Robbie Ray have nice success against them on the year, striking out at a 26.4% clip against right-hand pitching. So could be another one where Manoah gets it done with about 1/3 of the field expected to be on him. So will you be amongst that 1/3 of the field, Alex?
Well, I think it was really tilting his first start because we were all like psyched to play him on this show, and then the game got postponed, and it was like a 7-inning doubleheader. So now that we finally get to play him, I'm thinking that maybe I will. He had a 40% strikeout rate over 3 stars in AAA this year. So that 31% for his first start in Major League wasn't really unexpected. And the matchup pretty solid for strikeouts versus Miami. Now, one thing we gotta mention is Toronto's home games are played in Buffalo now instead of in Tampa. So that's going to make their home field a lot more favorable for pitchers than it had been up to this point in the season. All things considered, I think Manoah is pretty interesting.
Max, how are you feeling about Manoah here? About 1/3 of the field expect to be playing him today on Draftkings. Has had those good results recently and also had a pretty good pitch count in that first start too, 88 pitches in that one. So does seem like a lot of things looking out positively for him.
Yeah, no, I like the spot for him, even though, we never really know what we're going to get in his second start in the majors. The first start, you're right, he did run pretty good with, his really high 30% K rate, but only 11% swinging strikes and giving up an xFIP almost like 4. But I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. He was pitching against the Yankees, so that was a little bit of a down matchup. This is going to be much easier versus Miami. They really only have like 2 hitters that you're really afraid of. And I like targeting these really heavy fastball slider type guys versus a mostly right-handed lineup, right? Like we only have Jazz and Corey Dickerson here from the left side. And I guess Isan Diaz, who you really don't project to be a really power hitter. So other than that, just a bunch of right-handers going against him. I think he'll be able to dominate without slider. 8.2K is far too cheap. And I'm not really enthused about the guys that we have projected above him. So that kind of gives him to me at a really high ownership. 33% is high, but I'm willing to eat the chalk here, I think.
Yeah, I would think if this were a better or a tougher matchup, you could see starting to go the other way a little bit more. But at the price tag, I'm in the particular situation. I agree with you guys. Like 6 guys who strike out above league average in the Miami lineup. Also that decent 26% K rate that we talked about earlier against right-hand pitching on the year. Lots of things looking good for Manoah to get at least one more good start before maybe starts to find his density a bit more. On the other side, we're going to have Pablo Lopez going against Toronto. 4.7 implied runs for Toronto in this spot. Lopez 23.2% K rate, which is actually improved for him, but still under league average what the year's been so far. 3.7 xFIP. Lopez, one of those guys who should not be 10K would be my immediate thought on DraftKings. 1% ownership, only pitching about 90 pitches per appearance. So Alex, to me, I'll say Pablo Lopez, probably not a guy to get much of in the player pool, but do you feel any strongly? And I guess, is there any meaningful difference to you for him on Fanduel?
Well, I think while he's crazy on DraftKings, maybe just unadvisable on FanDuel is, I guess, how I'd say it. Toronto has one of the best lineups in MLB, and they don't strike out a ton. So there's really no reason to go to Pablo Lopez. I don't know how they came up with that pricing. Maybe they thought the park was a lot better for pitchers than it is.
Yeah, it is a weird one here, Max. I'm going to assume you're on the same boat, but any thoughts on Pablo Lopez, or if you feel anything strong for Toronto's hitters? This is one of those spots that I think I kind of don't like either side, because Lopez should sort of decrease the production enough. The Buffalo Park does play pretty easy dimensions, but I don't have the highest confidence on either side here. How are you feeling about it, Max?
Yeah, it's actually a really good matchup for him, right? Like, it's mostly right-handers. He has 51% ground balls versus right-handers, 28.6% hard hit, and he's striking out 26% of right-handers as opposed to 20% of left-handers. So, like, 10K is obviously a little bit insane, but it's a really good matchup for him, which kind of takes me off of Toronto as a whole. Obviously, these are all great hitters, right? Like, Vladdy Guerrero is pretty much just destroying everybody. Alcantara also was really projecting well against a guy like him, but he just destroyed him. So I think he's pretty much matchup proof now, but the rest of these guys, I don't really want to play them. I guess Pablo Lopez at 1% ownership does make an enticing GPP play. If you're playing like 150 lineups, just play like 10% of him or something and just hope he has a crazy good game. But yeah, I'm not going to play him on like 3 max or anything, but I'm also not playing Toronto.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable way to look at it. There are some better pitchers to pay for. I will talk about it throughout the course of this show. Let's get one more game in before we do money time at the halfway point-ish or so. We got Washington getting 4.5 implied runs against Drew Smyly. Drew Smyly, another pitcher who seems like he should probably not be much of a fixture of what you're doing today. 20% K rate for him on the year, which is down from the 24.7% K rate he's had since 2019. Was also looking a lot better last year, but those numbers seem like they've been a bit of an aberration. Swinging strike rate's down for him. Chase rate is actually up a little bit, but not getting much results with that. 7% on run rate as well on the year. And it does seem like this is a spot going against Smyly that Washington could create some power. So Max, how are you feeling about the Washington hitters? And if you have any thoughts on Drew Smyly, who's actually, I'm shocked to see he's going to be 21% owned. So I guess maybe I am alone in not finding him the most appealing either, but how are you feeling about Drew Smyly too?
Yeah, I don't get that ownership really. I mean, this is a guy giving up 50% hard hits, X slugging of 535, 15-degree launch angle, 12% barrel percentage. I mean, it's a perfect guy to target it with our stacks here. I think it should make the Washington stack under owned here, and we have them at only 9% ownership. So it's still a negative leverage score, but I think that's a really good spot for Washington batters. Yeah, so give me all the Washington batters here. I don't really get the Smyly thing. And Atlanta's playing, 75 degrees, but that park does play small when it gets warmer out. So I really like the Washington batters here. Yeah, I mean, Yan Gomes is probably my favorite catcher here at 3.5K. Really nice power numbers this year, 499 X slugging. And just, I think you can play like Juan Soto and Schwarber against this guy. Even though they're from the left side, they generate a ton of power. And if he doesn't stay in the game long enough, you get these really, really good hitters against the bullpen.
Yeah, Smyly actually worse against lefties over the course of the last few years. A 335 ISO to lefties compared to a 230 ISO to righties. So one of those rare reverse splits one where it's just really egregious. An 8% on run rate, 6.5 xFIP to lefties. So I'm with you on that. I think Soto actually kind of an interesting. He's going to be owned a little bit, but still an interesting tournament option to go to, and Schwarber as well. Alex, how are you feeling about the Nationals here? And I guess if you have any thoughts on the Drew Smyly ownership, I mean, the ownership projections normally are really good at accounting for the field and all of that. And Smyly's price tag, I have to assume, works with some easy constructions to get to that people are trying to get to with both their stacks and their SP1 on DraftKings. But 20% Smyly, pretty egregious amount, especially when you got McClanahan at a similar price tag.
Yeah, Smyly is such a perplexing case because if you go back to last year, he looks like he was one of the best pitchers in MLB. I guess he only pitched like a couple of games, which is the issue. But yeah, I feel like he was a really good pitcher at one point. I guess he played 7 games last year. He was really solid in that. But over the first 8 this year, his performance has really dropped off. So I guess if people are on him, they're probably looking too much at last year's data. I mean, this year, 6 xFIP, that's egregiously bad. It's only 20% strikeout rate. So, let me see what the strikeout prop is on him, because sometimes people look at those and they kind of swing the ownership. It does look like they have him at a lot higher than we do, about a strikeout higher. So that could be a fun bet, is take the under on Drew Smyly strikeouts. Vegas is telling us this is like a really terrible spot because Washington has a 5-team total. So that does seem a tiny bit high to me, but Atlanta, it is 75 and humid, and there is some elevation there. So it doesn't look like a great spot for Smyly.
On the other side, we have Atlanta getting 5.6 implied runs against John Lester. John Lester, we've talked about some recently. 18% K rate for him on the year, giving up a 290 batting average, a 1.5 whip, walking guys more than you'd like to see, also giving up some hits. And a 4.6 xFIP is not terrible, but certainly not good, though it is in line with where he's been the last few years. Lester, another option that 9,100. But what is the pricing on DraftKings today would be my question, but does not seem like he's worth that. Won't be owned very much, Max, but if you want to segue over the Atlanta hitters, you can do that, unless you have any really thoughts that you want to add about John Lester.
Yeah, John Lester is priced like he was like 5 years ago. When was he good? In Boston, I guess. I mean, yeah, it's just not a guy I would ever play at that price or even lower. So yeah, it also really only giving up 6% barrels this year. So not giving up a ton of hard contact, but slugging a 434, decent launch angle, and really not striking anybody out. And then you have this power hitting Atlanta lineup, Austin Riley batting fourth, Acuna batting first, Swanson there. I like this team 1 through 5. I really do. I get their 5.6 run total is going to get a lot of people on them, but I think it's a decent spot. They're all expensive, so maybe that will get their ownership down a little bit. We have them projected for 11%, so that's palatable. I like the Atlanta side. I like the Washington side. Just give me all the bats here. I don't think there's really that much more analysis.
Yeah, and it does seem like the bats here will be decently owned, in particular Ronald Acuna and Ozzy Albies projecting for over 20% or over 25% for Acuna's case. We'll talk more about that in a second when we do some money time here. Freddie Freeman, though, under 10%, kind of appealing given the fact of what we talked about, that lefty-lefty splits for Lester also not particularly egregious, or not as egregiously bad, rather. He's not quite Smiley in terms of giving up more production, but still getting a 20% K rate, almost a 300 batting average allowed to lefties. I feel like Freeman's the one guy I would throw into a full Brave stack, try to decrease that ownership product, Alex, but do you have any hitters you'd prefer here? And how comfortable, I guess, do you feel with a guy like Acuna, who's clearly in a great spot, but projected for just shy of 30% ownership on DK does feel a little bit lofty?
Yeah, I mean, Acuna is probably the best player in baseball these days, other than Trout. So far, his numbers this year have been like off the charts: 350 ISO, 390 on base, and he steals bases too. So really, another guy you don't want to have at all. The ownership is high, but he also bats first, so that's going to give you extra plate appearances compared to other top price guys. So it's hard to find a hold there, but the stack is pretty high owned. Although, I mean, Lester kind of is past his prime, so it's really hard to argue with. I'd say it looks like a solid choice, but definitely going to be somewhat popular.
Yeah, maybe try to decrease that ownership product again with Freddie Freeman, or guys like Adrianza, Peretti, Kevon Smith at the bottom of the order, who's also a catcher. I think wouldn't be the craziest play. A guy who's actually had decent results over the last few years, and just for whatever reason never gets the recognition. But I think there's some ways to stack up Atlanta, and just definitely worth it. It seems like on the slate, really both sides seem worth stacking up here. Let's Tyler left, so I can't even get my money sound effect, but let me flip the hat anyway. Cha-ching. So there it is. It's money time, guys. So hit that like button if you can. We're gonna give you guys the top 5 owned plays on DraftKings and Fanduel for free. It's Tyler running back into the scene like Kramer to get the money sound effect off. Max has his money hat too. This is a money hat show. We appreciate it much having you guys here. Top 5 owned plays on DraftKings. Number 1 projected to be Walker Buehler at 43%. Number 2, Sean Manaea at 42%. Number 3, Alek Manoah up to 33%. Number 4, Nate Lowe at 32%. And number 5, Joey Gallo at 30%. On FanDuel, the top 5 looks like it'll be Ronald Acuna at 37% on there. Nelson Cruz, number 2 at 36. Number 3, Josh Donaldson at 34. Number 4, Walker Buehler at 33. And number 5, that twin stack completed with Miguel Sano at 30%. So that is very high ownership for the twin stack on FanDuel. Same as DraftKings, but keep it in mind more on FanDuel, where you're only getting the top 4 guys out of a stack on there. All right, let's keep it going because we still got 4 games to hit on. Boston, 4 implied runs against Framber Valdez. Framber Valdez on the year, looking pretty solid in his, I think, 1 appearance he's had so far, but 18 batters faced, a 1 whip, 3.8 xFIP. The xFIP right in line with where he's been historically. The swinging strike rate, though, not looking like it'll be improved. So his strikeout rate should be close to the 23.3% K rate we've had for him since 2019. And Valdez with a mediocre pitch count and sort of not a great matchup either. A Boston team that only strikes out a 19.3% clip against left-hand pitching. Max, I feel like Valdez, a play that maybe a pivot to Smiley, I guess, but also he's going to be 17% owned. And he also kind of looks like not a great play.
Yeah, I mean, I think McClanahan is definitely better than Smiley and Valdez. Maybe even combined. Yeah, just a terrible matchup. A team that doesn't strike out much in the Red Sox, hit for a ton of power. Yeah, I mean, Renfroe and Dalbec are like your only strikeouts here. And then everybody else just kind of takes their walks. It's a very Yankee-like approach. and an Astros-like approach to hitting, actually, where they just kind of, prolong at bats, run the pitch count up, and make your pitcher really miserable to roster against them. So, yeah, I'm really not interested in Valdez. His stats look fine. Not really projecting as a high strikeout guy. 11% walks is very scary against his Boston team to me, because I think he can really just be out of this game in like the 30th inning, even without giving up a ton. The launch angle that he gives up is -3 so far. So he's a ground ball guy. So that kind of takes me off of a Red Sox stack as well, really. So it's just like another spot I just kind of want to avoid. It really feels like a slate where you just want to go over the ownership, even on the really high owned guys, and just kind of take your, plays with like McClanahan and some other low owned guys, and just kind of avoid spreading yourself too thin, I think.
Yeah, I think I'm feeling that more the more we go game by game here. But Alex, how are you feeling about Framber Valdez? Because projection, I guess, is not terrible relative to the other guys we're expecting to be pretty decently owned on the slate. And I'm sure it does work in certain lineup constructions. But how are you feeling about Valdez? And do you share Max's view, which I think is a pretty good one here, about Valdez maybe being able to limit production enough that the Boston stack doesn't look as appealing as they normally would?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a solid pitcher. Not anyone I'd be terribly afraid of, but definitely not a positive. I'm trying to figure out like if the roof is open in Houston, because that makes a pretty big impact. I think it should be, since it's only 80 degrees. Do you guys have a good reference for that? Because I've been really trying to find something.
I just import from Fantasy Schmabs, and they have roof closed.
Yeah.
Oh, it's close. Okay. Then I'm kind of puzzling over the 9 over under, but I guess these are two solid lineups. Anyway, I think Valdez isn't really a high strikeout guy, so I'm not really considering him. Boston, I think this park is just about average, so I think they're worth taking shots on. One of the better lineups going today. And the ownership is very, very low, like 1% on both Draftkings and Fanduel. So it does look like a nice pay up spot to get a little different.
The other side, you have Nick Pivetta going, a guy who has been much improved this year, up to a 26.3% K rate, giving up less power as well, a 1.8% on run rate. The XFIP, not that far off his longer-term sample of 4.3 XFIP this year compared to 4.6 since 2019. But the rest of the numbers have been improved, along with mild increases of swinging strike rate and chase rate. Actually, the chase rate's actually down. So I don't know if the strikeouts are going to hold, but Alex, on this spot, are you willing to go to Pivetta at all against the Houston team that doesn't strike out? It seems like the field very not willing to pay Pivetta's price tag, where he's just shy of 9K.
Yeah, I mean, Houston's the toughest team to go against as far as pitching fantasy. It's not Pivetta being bad at all. He has a 26% K rate. It does have control issues, so he doesn't get as deep in games. But normally someone that's on the radar, but today, because Houston only strikes out about 3/4 of the average team, just someone that I feel comfortable crossing off.
How about you, Max? You want to get any Pivetta for yourself, or do you want to transition over to the Astros hitters, who do look a little bit, actually a good bit over owned according to the top stacks tool, going against Pivetta, a guy who has made some strides, it seems?
Yeah, I mean, Pivetta looks like he's healthy again, which kind of translates to a 95-mile-an-hour fastball, really nice slider, 15% swinging strike rate, 12%, 13% last 3 games. Just a really solid fantasy pitcher. The matchup is awful, like I will admit that. They only strike out 19% of the time, but they also don't hit the ball that hard. They averaging 33% hard hit balls, the Houston does. So not like a ton of power in that lineup. I think if Jordan Alvarez is out of the lineup again, it makes this lineup much worse. And you can actually go against Houston. Brantley's already out, so that's another guy that really never strikes out. So they have like Miles Straw, McCormick, Maldonado, and Tucker at the bottom end, who do have decent strikeout rates. I mean, not great strikeout rates, but decent-ish ones. Yeah, so I think what that kind of tells me is this is a decent spot for GPPs for Pivetta, where you can get really different with a really chalky stack and another chalky pitcher and just playing him for differentiation. So I'm not going to cross him off completely, just because he does present upside Like we have him as in our top 2% top 2 pitcher percentage at 12%, which is pretty high. Like he's right around Montgomery, right around Pablo Lopez, and only 1% ownership, which really is very interesting to me, even at 8,700.
There's certainly some risks with Pivetta. I mean, he has been throwing pretty deep into games, 95 pitches per appearance, but taking 4.2 pitches per appearance to finish guys off. So maybe it could be a little bit tougher against a Houston team that does draw walks pretty well and doesn't strike out. But as a tournament option, I think you make a compelling case here. He does have an 11% chance or 11% leverage score for himself based on the difference between his chances of being a top 2 pitcher today and his 1% ownership. So if you want to take your risk there, you can. And we should talk quickly, Alex, about Yordan Alvarez, who does project right now for 25% ownership. The Houston stack ownership seems like it's largely being driven by him, though Kyle Tucker and Carlos Correa will also be decently represented. But if Alvarez is that price tag, Alice, 3,900 on DK, are you willing to get to Yordan Alvarez with the field, with about a quarter of the field expected to be on him?
Well, I think he looks like a terrific play, potentially batting cleanup, has really good power, and he's got the positive platoon split here. So it's hard to poke holes in it. But I do think it could be intriguing, maybe stacking up the team and not having him, because he just is projecting to be so much higher owned than anyone else on the team. So I do think this is a spot where you can make an ownership play, fade the good hitter, and because it's baseball, more often than not, that'll work.
All right, let's get to our next game on the slate. Texas getting 5.5 implied runs. They are the team who projects to be the top stack or have the highest odds of being a top stack today on both Fanduel and Draftkings. They will have a little bit less ownership on Minnesota on Fanduel than Minnesota. On Draftkings, though, they will also be pretty highly owned. In fact, also a little bit less owned than Minnesota on Draftkings, but much smaller gap on the site of Draftkings than it is on Fanduel. But Texas, though, spot here gets Antonio Senzatella, a guy who over the years has not been a good pitcher by any stretch. Definitely not a good fantasy pitcher with only a 14% K rate. 13.7% is the actual number, which is up from 13.3% from 2019. So watch out if he keeps up that kind of progression. By 2070, he's going to be a monster. But Senzatella at this point does seem like a pitcher we're also probably not going to like very much. And Texas's hitters on the other side, again, very chalky here in particular. Willie Calhoun, Nate Lowe, Joey Gallo, all these guys will be pretty highly owned. In between, you'll have Adolis Garcia, Kiner Falefa, a little bit less owned. But Max, how are you feeling about this spot? Because Senzatella, the one thing he has done over the course of years is keep that ball down and limit big production. And that's why he stayed as viable in cores as long as he has. But Texas hitters chalk today. So how are you feeling about him?
Man, even though he's a ground ball guy, this is a perfect spot against a team that has really good launch angles and like has those loopy swings like a Joey Gallo. They kind of get the ball in the air no matter what. And this guy can't strike him out. Like their whiff percentages are embarrassing, these guys, but they all have really nice barrel percentages. 18% for Adolis, 15% for Gallo, Low 12%, Solak 9%. Like Willie Calhoun is the one guy I would fade here. Only a 4% barrel percentage, kind of a guy that hasn't hit for much power so far this year. So like I think he's an interesting guy to avoid in the stack in order to differentiate. Senzatella is just giving up an xWOB of 351, slugging of 449. The barrel percentage isn't great at 7%, but this is perfect weather for Coors, right? Like once it gets into the 70s here, the ball just flies. I think Texas is way underpriced. Another just sign that DraftKings isn't paying attention to what is going on in the baseball world right now. It's paying too much attention to the NBA playoffs. So this pricing is pretty egregious.
It is a pretty cheap Texas team. Really, the only 5K guy that you'll be paying for here is going to be Joey Gallo. Actually, no, Adolis Garcia. Excuse me. Joey Gallo's 4,300. Yeah, Garcia's 5,000. So maybe that makes him a little more contrarian with the 13% ownership going his way. But Alex, how are you feeling about Texas in this spot? 5.5 implied runs. You might have that a little bit higher. But going against Senzatella, a guy who is certainly not a good pitcher by any stretch.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is an obvious spot for both teams, but especially Texas being really cheap and cores. That's really all there is to it. It has nothing to do with the quality of their bats. They look right around the league average. Colorado as well looks about like an average team, but there's I gotta factor in that their stats are half their games at Coors, so that makes them kind of terrible. if their stats are average and they play half their games at Coors. So I think Texas looks very solid, especially for the price. The ownership doesn't look like ridiculous. The one play I'm thinking besides DFS is I'm thinking about taking the under on the game as a whole. Like both of these lineups really aren't special. The weather in Colorado is going to be 70 and low humidity today. It just doesn't really scream to me like one of the highest scoring environments of the year. So I'm not head over heels for this game, but it doesn't look like the ownership in DFS is that crazy.
On the other side, we're going to have Jordan Lyles going, a guy who is not a ground ball pitcher, a guy who certainly allows some lift to the ball, getting up a 290 batting average, 4.5% on run rate on the year. And Max in this spot, Colorado, Alex kind of talked about it here. It's not an impressive Colorado lineup by any stretch, and they've been bad really all year long. A 137 ISO against right-hand pitching, a 291 on base percentage. They don't strike out a ton, so they got that going for them, but a 64 WRC plus, not the best here. But if anything is going to cure a lot of ills, it does feel like it could be Jordan Lyles, even though he has performed a little better in some spots this year that I feel like I've personally been surprised by, though. I'm sure the numbers still bear out that he mostly stinks.
Yeah, he mostly stinks. And I mean, he goes as the slider goes. For some reason, the last start, he only threw 11% sliders, ton of curveballs. So when he doesn't throw the slider, he kind of gets really hit hard and doesn't strike anybody out. But this Rockies team isn't very good also. They kind of really just come down to three guys for me. It's McMahon, Crone, and Blackman. Everybody else is not very good. So I think they're just a three-man stack for me. Brendan Rodgers is somebody who was really smashing the ball in the minors. And since coming back up, he's been okay, but 3.7K is way too cheap at a second base shortstop, where, you know, it's tough to fill those two positions with somebody who can possibly hit some home runs for you. So really, I guess it's just those four guys for me. I'm not on like Raimel Tapia at 4.8K. Of course, now he's probably going to hit a home run. So I guess I'm more into Texas here than I am the Rockies. Lyles is not a very good pitcher, does give up a lot of power. So both sides are very palatable, but I think Texas makes more sense.
And Colorado does look a little bit under-owned on the top stack tool. As I talked about, Texas does look over-owned on the top stack tool. So keep that in mind. Colorado going to have less ownership, but also certainly has a little bit less quality hitters who, as Alex mentioned here, also grading out better than they probably should because they're playing at Coors most of the time. I got 2 games left. Hit that like button if you can, guys. We got 235 people in here, only 45 likes. So get us to a respectable number here. I feel like 75 would be a nice target if you guys can get us there, but help us out. Hit that like button, especially if you're watching after the fact too, or after the fact, after we're live. So just help us out. Hit it if you can. St. Louis, 3.1 implied runs going against Walker Buehler. Walker Buehler going to be the best pitcher on the slate, it looks like, as well as projected top owned pitcher as well. 10.6 price tag on DK. Comparable numbers on Fanduel as well, but he has been kind of a mediocre strikeout guy this year, 25.3% K rate compared to a 28.3% K rate since 2019, is keeping the walks and hits down with a 0.9 whip, 4.5% walk rate, shows a good amount of control for him. And in the spot against St. Louis, Alex, it does seem like maybe the strikeout upside not quite there, but he does pitch enough and does pitch deep into games enough that certainly seems like he's the safest play on the slate in some, for at least from most perspectives, I would say. But how are you feeling about Buehler here and also the 45%-ish ownership we have going his way?
Yeah, I think he looks pretty solid. St. Louis, their lineup is about league average. So Buehler has been above average pitcher this year with a 3.5 xFIP. Not a huge strikeout guy, but as you were saying, kind of someone that you could count on for consistency. But the question here is really, do you want to spend 10K on a pitcher today? There are a lot of great bats to pay for, so I don't think that it's necessarily a price point I want to go to. But if you have the money, you want to get some cheap stacks, Buehler makes a nice play.
Max, how are you feeling about Buehler? Do you have any reservations at all going against him? And I guess, does that give you any more interest going to a St. Louis stack that looks like will be entirely unknown at fairly reasonable price tags?
Yeah, I think this is probably my fade of the day where I'm not going to have much Buehler at all. I just don't see a ton of upside in this team in this pitcher going against the Cardinals. Cardinals are all really, really decent hitters here. O'Neill and Justin Williams strike out a bunch, but nobody else really. Everybody's kind of average. And he's projecting just to be way, way too chalky in the spot at 40% for me. And I just don't see the upside that's going to give me, like a 40-point game where I can't match it with anybody that's cheaper. If the matchup was different, maybe I would go to Buehler. But I think he's trying to just get deeper into games here just because the Dodgers never let their pitchers run the pitch count up anymore. He's probably going to have just right around 195 pitches. Yeah, I just don't see any way that he's going to give you a number that is going to be hard to match with the way that he pitches and his strikeout rate. He also gives up 40% hard hits and X slugging of 444. So it's not like the Cardinals can't get to him. They have Tyler O'Neill with 22% barrels, Paul Goldschmidt, 10% barrels. Yadi Molina is hitting the ball really well, Arenado. So these are all really, really good names. So the matchup's bad. The guy doesn't really pitch that deep into games. So to me, this screams like a fade spot at 40%.
It's a fade spot for you, Max, but is it one where you are trying to stack up the Cardinals, or are you still mostly avoiding them?
Yeah, it's just too many other spots where the totals are super, super high, and we're going against gas can pitchers. So I don't think I need to stack them. I wouldn't hesitate to take a one-off against Buehler, though. Somebody that can hit a home run against him and really ruin his score and give you somebody at 1% to mix in with your chalky stacks.
Makes sense to me. We got Carlos Martinez on the other side, a guy who has been really pitching weirdly this year. A 1.1 whip for him on the year, a 14% carry. That's down substantially from the 19% carry he's had since 2019. So that's not the best part, but he's had a few useful games thrown in between, throwing 88 pitches per appearance at a cheap price tag. And it does seem like it's a real tough matchup, Alex, for Carlos Martinez, but at his price tag, maybe he's vaguely usable with the 6% chance of being a top pitcher and 1% ownership. I feel like we have to talk about him just a little bit here, but if you want to write him off entirely, I'm okay with that as well.
Yeah, he just hasn't struck guys out this year, 14%. So going up against the Dodgers, that's definitely a negative too. The only thing that's going in his favor is the park in LA. So today is a rough pitching slate, but I think he's one of the worst options.
Dodgers hitters, though, perhaps could be more appealing than for you. It does seem like it's a real weirdly humid day in LA, apparently, which I didn't notice, but 87% humidity, it seems, at the park by the time the first pitch goes off. So any interest in the Dodgers hitters going against a guy in Martinez who, as we just mentioned, just doesn't strike guys out?
I don't think it's a terrible idea. The ownership looks somewhat low on the Dodgers today. But you have to factor in that they're going up against teams that are in very positive hitting environments. So it's hard to get super excited about the Dodgers, but they get the talent to pull it off here, even if the conditions aren't quite as good as other parks.
Max, how are you feeling about the Dodgers in this spot going against Martinez, who does keep the ball down fairly well, gets hit decently hard, 8.4% barrel ball rate, but nothing too crazy. Are you willing to go to the Dodgers with a 4.9 implied run total for them?
Yeah, as a stack, I just don't really like the Dodgers here just because of the park. Even though you're right, it is weirdly humid in LA. I never even thought it got to 90% on the West Coast. But yeah, I mean, Max Muncy's really the only guy I'm interested in. He fits that second base spot on DraftKings really nicely. He's a little bit expensive, but 594 X slugging, 91 exit velocity, 40% hard hits. Martinez isn't going to strike him out. So I really do think this is a really nice spot for a guy like Muncy with a 16% barrel percentage. I also wouldn't write Martinez off completely. He has been pitching a little bit better recently. His fastball velocity is back up to 94. The swinging strike rate, I guess, is topping out around 8%, which isn't great. But 6.3K is a really, really nice price. And I think I would play him over the really chalkier options like Smiley and Valdez.
And I got our last game on the slate. Oakland, 4.3 implied runs going against Chris Flexen, and Chris Flexen not flexing on him this year with a 15% K rate for himself. 304 batting average allowed, has been really a not good pitcher, even on a slate where we have had a lot of not good pitchers. Is going to be 5% owned. I don't know that I see that very much going against an Oakland team. Strikes out at this year's league average, 24.1% clip. Does have a lot of dangerous power as well, a 170 ISO on the year against right-hand pitching. Alex, do you have any interest in Flexen, or are you feeling more of the Oakland hitters?
I mean, I always have interest in guys that were former KBO players. So other than that, really nothing too exciting here. He's not really a strikeout pitcher either. The matchup, the nice thing is the park in Seattle is a pitcher's park, although that's more true on days where the roof is closed, and the temperature in Seattle looks actually kind of high at 78, so maybe unusually good conditions for bats here. And yeah, I think the matchup isn't good either. So I don't have any problem writing flexing off.
Let's talk quickly about the Oakland hitters. For you, Max, are you feeling them at all? And then if you want to transition over to Sean Manaea, who is going to be a chalk play on the slate with 42% ownership, let's hit on all the Oakland parts if we can.
Yeah, it's Matty Olson for me. I just love the way this guy hits the ball. Everything's in the air, slugging of 525, 50% hard hits, 14% barrels, and against the guy that won't really strike you out. And another guy that gets the ball in the air versus a guy that in flexing that doesn't really give up a ton of launch angles, so mostly ground balls for him. So I think this is like a perfect matchup for a guy like Matty Olson. Feels too cheap here as well. Really a couple cheap guys here that you can mix in. Seth Brown projected to bat fourth at 2.9K, and Mitch Moreland at 2.6K. Both have power against a guy like Flexen. Yeah, I'm not really interested in Flexen, and I'm not really interested in Manaea either. Just way too low of a strikeout rate. The Seattle team does project better with guys like Ty France here, Haniger, and even Murphy with a bunch of power. So this is another guy that's projecting at like in Manaea at 40% ownership, whereas he only has 24% strikeouts. A guy that feels safe, but nothing is really safe in baseball. We're trying to get as much upside as possible in our GPP teams. So sure, like play Manaea and cash, but I'm going to stay away from this guy in most of my GPP lineups.
I might be a little more bullish on Manaea just because it's such a bad slate and he is facing a Seattle team that strikes out at a 28% clip. The lineup they have projected today, I have a little bit higher version of 28% as well. So I think I would just get some Manaea out of sheer fear of having no good pitchers at all, I guess. And Alex, how are you feeling about Manaea? Because the price tag is pretty steep. He has gotten decent strikeout results on the year at a 24.2% clip, at least relative to what he's been historically. So are you with a chalk Manaea on a slate where we just have very little options?
Yeah, I mean, there's basically three good pitchers on the slate. You got Buehler, you got Manaea, and Alex Manoah. So I don't have any problem just rotating between those three guys because the drop off is so significant to get to the next tier. So what I might do is instead of trying to spend down at pitcher, I might throw in like a one-off that's cheap to just make the salaries for my stacks work. Not a great fantasy pitcher, but the park is decent. The matchup, Seattle does strike out quite a bit, and they have a worse than average lineup. So I think this it feels like a pretty safe spot as far as baseball goes.
All right, let's get the home run picks in faster. Just give me your guy's name. No details needed. Alex, you go first.
All right, JD Martinez.
All right, Max, how about you?
Matty Olson.
And I will take Ronald Acuna, the bravest take out of all of them, I'd say. Who, man, this guy, nobody ever picks him on a slate. This is cruel.
Sad trombone.
Make sure to follow at DFS Max, follow at Awesemo DFS, and follow at Chris Spags. We are here for you guys all the time. We're doing the deeper dive. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel as well to check out all the content, including me on the tip-off coming up right next. We appreciate you guys for being here. Enjoy your days, and good luck.